We have a verse about the ox. V'chigach shor et ish or et ishava mate. When an ox gores a man or a woman and they die, sakol isakel hashor. The ox is going to be stoned. This is really interesting. This is like a capital punishment for the ox. And the verse goes on to say, Velo yeachel et basaro, and its flesh can't be eaten. And Rashi, the commentators comment on this verse, by the way. Well, isn't it obvious that its flesh can't be eaten because it hasn't been killed in a kosher way? Obviously, we can't eat the flesh, but so there seems to be something else going on here. And the Mishnah is going to explore around the boundaries of this ox. And it's going to mention, by the way, on the way, that this ox needs to have a master, an owner. And it doesn't have to be a male master. It's the halakha for damages we've said is gender neutral. But a few verses later, we read V'chigof shor ish et shor ehu. When a person's ox injures his neighbor's ox, and they're going to sell a live ox, they're going to divide the price. And we've learned that if the ox was in the habit of goring, velo yishmerenu ba'alav, and its owner failed to guard it. Again, this ox and the owner are absolutely connected. And with that in mind, with the stoning of the ox and the connection of the ox to the owner, let's now jump into the 7th Mishnah of the 4th chapter, and we'll talk about oxen whose ownership might not be certain. Shura Isha, the ox of a woman. Shura Yitomim, the ox of orphans. Shura Apitropos, an ox belonging to a guardian. Shur Hamidbar, a wild ox. Shur HaHekdesh, a dedicated ox, one dedicated to the temple. Shur Hager Shemei Ve'ein Lo Yorshim, the ox belonging to a convert who died and doesn't have any inheritors. By the way, these are all oxen that you might think don't have full ownership. How does a woman fit into that, for example? Well, the property that a woman brings into the marriage is essentially, the benefit from it belongs to her husband. And if she acquires it during the marriage, then her husband certainly has rights to it. So there's a blurring of the, if you like, the women's property rights are complicated, as we learned in Seder Nashim. And of course, the guardian, the orphans, well, the wild ox, obviously, the ox belonging to the temple. These are all animals that don't have a clear owner. But really interesting. The Mishnah rules straight away. They're all liable for the death penalty. So the death penalty seems to apply to all of these. And Rabbi Yehuda is going to disagree. The halakha doesn't go according to Rabbi Yehuda, but it might be interesting to look at the examples he picks on. Rabbi Yehuda omer shor hamidbar shor hahekdesh shor ger shemeit ve'ein lo yorshim. So Rabbi Yehuda brings 3 of these examples. The wild ox, well, that's obviously hefker, it's obviously ownerless. Shur hekdesh, an ox belonging to the temple. Well, clearly it's not owned by a human at this point. Shur ger shemeit ve'ein lo yorshim, and the ox belonging to a proselyte, belonging to a convert who died without heirs. Kuturin minamita. These, according to Rabbi Yehuda, are exempt from death. And he makes it explicit. Mipnei she'ein lahem ba'alim. They don't have an owner. So he doesn't seem to include the woman's ox and the ox of orphans and the guardian's ox. But these 3 particular examples don't seem to have an owner. And we've seen that the owner is connected to the ox. Actually, the word ox occurs, the Gemara learns that the word ox occurs 7 times in the verses, and the Gemara actually learns that all these boundary cases are included. So the halacha doesn't go according to Rabbi Yehuda, but we still remember his view. What if its status changes during this process? So an ox which is going out to be stoned. So the judgment has already been passed on this ox. And his owners dedicated it to the temple. So they dedicated it after it has been sentenced. Einor Mukudash, but it's not dedicated. Why is it not considered dedicated? Well, at this point, it's not the owner's property anymore. It's sentenced. It's not something that it's not tangible property that can be dedicated. And if he slaughtered it, its flesh is forbidden. Remember, the verse said, its flesh shall be eaten. And we wonder, well, how can that be? The flesh couldn't be eaten because it's killed by stoning. It's obviously not kosher. We can't eat it. And the Mishnah is going to make it's going to state precisely, if the owner slaughtered it in a kosher way before it got stoned, we still don't eat it. We still don't eat it. We don't eat its meat. What about before it was sentenced? If all this happened before nigmar dino, before judgment was given, we're going to go through a judicial process with this ox. Hikdishov alav, his owners dedicated it. At that point, it's dedicated. Mukudash, it's dedicated. And if he slaughtered it under these circumstances, at this point, the flesh is going to be permitted.